Welcome to DABCC Radio,
where smart people listen.
Virtualization and Cloud Talk,
Featuring cutting-edge solutions from the hottest companies around the globe.
broadcasting from the DABCC offices in sunny Sarasota, Florida.
Surrounded by computers, books, and Legos.
A Microsoft MVP, Citrix Charter CTP, VMware vExpert.
And your host, Douglas Brown.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of DABCC Radio. I'm very excited. We have Steve Greenberg with us. And if you don't know Steve, Steve is a CTP Fellow at Citrix. He's been in the Citrix space, in the server-based computing, virtualization, cloud, desktop virtualization, application virtualization, you name it, in the EUC space for as long as anybody. I know I met Steve in the 90s. Just a great guy all the way around. So today we're going to talk a bit about what excites him, what he sees the changing of the world within, the past 20 years. Just going to see, I have no clue where this podcast is going to go. So let's see. But at the end, I promise you, I have a great story. So stick around for the very end, and I'm going to take you through a fun story that's a true story about something I did when I was a consultant to break down what I call us versus them. And give and bring the users. I think Steve and I will talk about this in the podcast. I know we will. Is about how important the end user is. It's not just important to give them a good experience. It's important to bring them along with the experience. And I'll talk about that. And I have a great story about when I was a consultant. I think you guys will laugh and probably walk away thinking, wow, that means something. And I'm going to change or adapt this idea into the way I do my job. So no further ado. I'm really excited. Like I said, I'm really excited. Steve is just awesome. So with no further ado, let's just jump into my interview with Steve Greenberg from Thin Client Computing. Okay, Steve, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. We did the roundtable, last week, something like that. And now we're going to come back, and I'm really excited about this because this is something I've wanted to do with you for quite some time. I've known you forever, right? And so this will be a lot of fun. I'm curious to see where we take this. So that being said, for those who don't know who you are, can you tell us who is Steve Greenberg and what do you do?
Sure, Doug. It's great to be here and get a chance to sit down and talk. So I'm Steve Greenberg. I'm based in Scottsdale, Arizona. I started a company over 20 years ago called Thin Client Computing, and we've been working in this space of Citrix and VMware and thin clients and all of this, great virtualization technology for that whole time, and just loving riding the wave. And I'll tell you a funny anecdote, Doug, that we probably haven't talked about before. Back in '97, when I started the company, I needed a name. I needed to go to the state registrar and put a name in. And I kind of looked through the yellow pages. Remember those? Like,
I do.
And it was always things like Southwest Business Computing or Scottsdale Computing. So it was actually a play on words, Thin Client Computing. In the tech industry, we used to say thin client server-based computing. I kind of did it as a play on words, like, the company and thin client. But it's been a great ride, and I'm really excited, especially we're kind of seeing this resurgence of the relevance, and we'll get into that.
You got it. Yeah, you've been doing this a long time. I mean, you Thin Client Computing is one of the first real Citrix shops out there, right?
It's what we focused on from day one. I had been a Citrix customer for about 5 years, and that's really long time ago when Citrix was based on OS2. And I just did amazing stuff. All the stuff we take for granted now was brand new back then. And it just blew my mind. And after doing it for 4 or 5 years as an IT director, a hands-on implementer, I was like, hey, we got to get this out in the market and do this. And it's just purely out of, dumb geek love for tech and really no good business plan.
I don't know about that. Well, one of the other things that I want to bring it up because it is really kudos to what you do and your thought process, right? Always trying to think out of the box and make better solutions for customers. But Thin Client with their customers have won a couple innovation awards. Can you talk about Citrix Innovation Awards? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, well, one of the ones I think that really stands out because its longevity is Cox Communications. So the project Cox Connect won one of the first Citrix Innovation Awards in 2007 because of the transformation of the business that occurred of doing a real work at home solution that long ago that included voice and a whole process of onboarding people and training them and validating their workspace, and productivity went up over 20%, which is unheard of in call centers, because we have call center clients that we talk to who have more than 100% attrition, and we're like, what does that even mean? And they mean in 1 month everybody has come on and they've lost more than 100%. It's the worst retention industry, and this just transformed the technology in the company in so many ways. That was 2007. But 10 years later, Mark T. was still the CEO of Citrix and created a special 10-year of innovation award because Cox and us together had just continued to innovate and expand it. And it went into an incredible story of transforming their company and making a more unified nationwide solution with the IT staff, but leveraging West Coast and East Coast and failover, and just an amazing story, an amazing customer that to this day just continues to innovate. And then a couple of other recognitions, a lot of case studies of projects we've done. I laughed the last time I took the Citrix sales certification test, 2 of our projects were in there.
Oh, that's cool.
I didn't even know they were there as examples of, if you see this, what do you do? So that was a lot of fun. And I think the thing I'm most proud of last year was to receive the first CTP Fellow Award. Yeah. So Citrix and the CTP program have created, kind of a recognition of a long-term contribution and technical ability and helping with the community. So that's what I'm most proud of.
Yeah, that's very cool, Steve. Very, very cool. And yeah, what do I say? So, did you answer the questions correctly in the sales test about yours?
I hope so. I passed.
you got 98%. The 2 questions wrong were your own questions.
Exactly.
I dispute those. I know the correct answer.
That's not what really happened. I was there.
Yeah, exactly. So you want to, we were chatting about what we want to talk about, right? And someone like you is so much fun to chat with because we can go anywhere with anything, talk about anything. And you've been around since day one, really. So, you talked about maybe telling the story about thin client and server-based computing over time and how it's sort of, at first, I guess, and you can probably explain it better than I can, right? But at first it really exploded, and then you saw maybe a little dull in it, and now it's starting to explode again. So do we want to go down that path? What do you think?
I think that'll be fun, Doug. And let's start at the end, because at the end was the end of 2017. I was getting kind of bummed out, like this cloud stuff's coming, everything's shifting, the message, the vendors are all changing. It's not really clear exactly what's best for any customer, and we're getting a little disappointed. And then we all met up at IGEL Disrupt in Austin this month, and I just realized that it's coming around. And I thought it would be fun to go back to the origin, talk about what was so great about this technology, and why is it like almost sort of relaunching or reinvigorated right now. And I'll keep it kind of quick, but you remember this, Doug, because I remember when you were our local Citrix SE, a lot of the projects were about people having applications that were client server or dispersed, and they're trying to grow or they're trying to work remotely. And it was a given that you'd go client server and have your PC over a T1 or some other crappy connection and try to run a client server app. And in the early days, a lot of the Citrix wins were about putting the application next to the data. So you bring up a Citrix server, you put it next to the middleware and the database, and people run it remotely, and it's awesome. Yeah. And that was really a kind of an initial use case. But it also became clear that gave you a single point of installation and management. So you can install apps on 1 or 10 or 100 servers a single way and service, 1, 10, or thousands of users. And that was great. And then you started to notice that, hey, I don't have to do anything on the endpoint. I did all the work on the server, and now this endpoint is, a thin client or a PC or whatever at the time, and I don't need to do much there. And what we started to see were people adopting thin client devices, as we called them at the time, and the idea was I don't have to support this remote office at all. Like, we had lots of clients who, if they had 20 users there, they bought 22 thin clients and put 2 in the closet. And if someone's working on a desktop and there's a problem with it, the power, it won't boot, they just took it out, went to the closet, grabbed another one and put it in. What a revolution, right? That compared to when you think about what we used to have to do in those days to support PCs. So that kind of launched us. But then we started to see these amazing successes with customers. Like, for example, a customer would say, whatever version at the time, we're on Windows 3X or NT or 4, whatever, and we want to upgrade the desktops, but we just got a quote and it's going to take 9 months and millions of dollars. Could we use Citrix to do that instead? Absolutely. Let's not, replace all those desktops. Let's just move it to the data center. And then we started to have those kinds of same solutions around someone going, oh, we're merging companies and we have 4 Active Directories. We want to create a brand new one. And we'd say, great, let's create a brand new Active Directory, create all the accounts, bring up Citrix, and from your existing workstation, just log on to it and start working. And we take that for granted today, but that avoided like a multi-year project, right?
Sure.
These are amazing things. We saw that with companies acquiring each other, and just one company acquires another one and says, okay, starting on this date, you log on to our system on Citrix. What an incredible thing. Instead of doing an entire integration project, right, that requires changing out every security account and so forth. And then what we started to see in like our healthcare and hospital environments were follow me sessions or smooth roaming, where you could keep your session live. One of the early cases for this was like chip designers. They're really, really expensive engineers, really specialized, and they would want to come up with like a chip design. When I worked with Motorola, for example, in the early days, and with Citrix technology, well, without it, they would run it on their workstation and maybe set it to run before they leave for the day, and then it would fail. And then they'd come in the next day and make a change and run it again. Well, what we started to do were things like start this job off, go home, spend some time with the kids, put them to bed, check your model. Oh, it failed. Let me change this, right? And fix it, run it again, disconnect, come back in the morning. You just did 2 days of work in one. Things like that. These are all kinds of benefits. I'm sure you remember working in the field. Sure. And kind of projects we used to do. And so then, Doug, you mentioned, for example, the innovation award with Cox Communications. And that's what I like to think of as phase 3, when we got fully functional work at home. And that meant that, not like, hey, I could log on and do something trivial, but you could station people at home, and in this case, call center people in volume. And they could be very, very happy, productive. The companies could expand their reach. I mean, they were running out of how many people they could hire that could make it to the office in rush hour. And so they needed to go wider. They needed to keep the quality up. So the ability to handle voice and, high performance application sessions made a huge difference. And so I kind of think of phase 3 as when work at home, and then the ability to expand geography. And then what became huge for us as well was creating failovers and redundancy across geography. So data centers in more than one city, users being routed to the best place, losing connectivity to one data center and just continuing to work in another. That was like really a big, big impact for businesses. And then around that same time is when VDI, and when since we're in the industry, we know that VDI really means a dedicated desktop OS versus server hosted. And that becomes a full citizen in this phase of, a few years ago to about now, where at scale, you could give people their own desktop virtual machines and really pull it off and get a great experience. So that's kind of where we sort of, peaked. And then in what I call phase 4 is where everything starts to become cloudy. And I mean, the pun is intended. The cloud emerges, and we're not really sure where this all means. And this is what I was saying at the end of last year. It seemed like we lost focus, or maybe this wasn't as relevant. And then technology started to seem older. And this phase is characterized by web and hyperscale. So people like eBay, Amazon, Google, Facebook, they came up with ways to take off-the-shelf, low-cost servers, write software, and create massive scale. Servers weren't these holy, precious things anymore that had a cost a fortune. You just had a lot of them and you just replaced them and expanded them at will. And more SaaS apps became available. So the one that I really remember coming up is Salesforce and other HR type applications. They could host them for you. They could become web apps, and they become very effective, and they didn't require server-based hosting and VDI. And it kind of seemed like Microsoft was getting old and not relevant anymore. Cloud was coming. People are jumping on email. It's like, what's going on here? But then in the last couple of years, when you stop and think about it, it all kind of changed. Microsoft became cool again. Do you agree with that, Doug? I'm curious. Your take on that.
I do. I've said for a long time that it's strange because somewhere along the way, back in the day, it was sort of Microsoft was the evil empire. I never agreed with that. I always saw Microsoft as what they were, which was the standard for us all to build upon, which was extremely important, as you remember the days before standards. And nowadays, without standards, we end up with these walled garden, blah, 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 blah. So yes, but because they became this evil empire, the ideal of it, I think that they became, and they became very stagnant. They didn't embrace mobility. They didn't embrace the internet right away. And you had all these startups, in a garage that were, creating the innovation, right? So the idea or the mindset that I guess that Microsoft had become stagnant was definitely prevalent.
Yeah, that was the feeling. But, with Satya in charge, he quietly spent a few years retooling. Correct. And now the biggest contributor to open source, like on GitHub, is Microsoft.
Correct.
Who's writing the most apps for the most platforms?
They went away from the Microsoft way, which was to live in the Microsoft kingdom and only the Microsoft kingdom. They could do that in the 90s and the 2000s, right? Because they could ignore everyone else, and they had the customer base, and the customer base went along with them. I think the difference was sort of the millennial, the user, in the fact that really the consumerization of IT, right? The fact that no longer just the techies had computers, but we all had computers, and not just to do, instant messaging at home, but to do everything. And then the iPads and mobile, the iPhone and all that. And that started changing, and that gave us the ability to have SaaS everywhere, right? And Microsoft had to either get with that or not get with that. And what they did is they embraced it, and they ran with it, and they made it cool. Office 365 was
example. That's the perfect example of what I was saying is the consumerization. Now it seemed like IT just couldn't keep up, or it was old or outdated. Let's just go around them. Let's just go buy a app, a service that we can use because it's better because IT can't respond. But you know what? We've shifted out of that. That was true temporarily, but right now we kind of have the best of all worlds. We figured out, I have a number of customers that have figured out which of their on-premise applications and resources matter, and they've pretty much gotten rid of email. They've either gone to the Google suite or mostly to Office 365 and offloaded that. They don't want to be in the business of email.
Correct.
But they do want to be in business of their important core applications, and they're not really going away. So we've kind of fine-tuned that. We've offloaded what we don't need. Things that are SaaS services and web-based, we found them. People are using them. They're right. They've got the right apps in the cloud and the right ones on premise. But you know what? We still have PCs. We have all this, plus we still have to maintain endpoints. And this is where I feel like we've come full circle. This is what I think IGEL Disrupt kind of really brought out and sort of launched again, is the best of all worlds, right? What we used to call a thin client, you and I don't like that word anymore. A secure endpoint, software-based. Now we need that same thing, but in today's world, which is an endpoint, which is just software you can easily manage, and it gets you to everything, and there's nothing on it because you don't want data there. You don't want someone to steal it. And I just think we're at a great point in technology where we're taking the best of all this and the new and combining them. So that was a long answer to a short question, but
no, I love it. I love it. Absolutely love it. I love guys like you because you just let them go, and I sit here and write down 1,000 questions for you, right? So, I don't know where to start. I think that, I think you said a bunch of interesting things at the end. Let's maybe work our way backwards, or we'll jump around. We'll do whatever we want. But
sure, that sounds great.
That, I think IT is interesting because I think you're right about, we're finally coming along, but I think that's not, I don't agree that everyone does. I think that the IT departments that get it, and when I mean get it, they understand that their job is to facilitate the end user to do their job. And I think that, guys like us, we came from a world where we controlled everything. We told them, hey, you use Office Suite. You don't use Slack. You use the Office Suite. But Slack is better. No, but Microsoft has Teams. You use this. And those are the companies I think that that still don't get it and will have more difficulty and will end up with shadow IT. And the companies that embrace and say, yes, we do use the Office Suite, but I understand that Slack is better. I understand that maybe this to-do list software that you're using is better, and they start embracing that. And
that's an interesting point, because that's one of the reasons that I'm not even sure what to call it, because I don't want to say thin client, but hosted, virtual-based computing, Citrix, VMware style computing is so powerful, because take the example you said, if the person needs to use Slack, well, they can just have a Mac, right? And they can run Slack on it. And the business apps and the secure data can be hosted and controlled by the company, but you can allow them a space in which they can do what they want. Now, if the business, the organization doesn't allow that or call for that, it's got security, it's got constraints, HIPAA, PCI, whatever, then you deliver the session hosted and fully secured and don't allow things to go on outside of that. Again, it's the best of both worlds. You can do it now. Before, they were breaking your system, or crashing your Citrix server, or creating massive security holes. There's ways to do it now, and you just choose. And that's what I think of as software defined.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. And the rise of the portal, right? The rise of the app portal, be that storefront or, even back in the day, web interface, or, the app store. The fact that users can self-provision things, I think, is extremely important, and something that's quite new that started in the old days, but now it's definitely, an on-demand type of functionality that the users are used to at home and they require within IT, right?
Exactly. And you know what? That's where the winners are going to be, I think, in this coming phase. I'm very closely aligned with Citrix, and we've been very successful with them. But I think they have the right idea. Their workspace service, or whatever they're going to call it, because I think it's in transition, where it's exactly what you said. It's self-subscribed. It's go to, I'm using these old words and they feel funny, so we need good ones, but a portal, right? Or a SaaS. You log in and now there's all different kinds of services and you consume the ones that you need. That's where we're going. And that's the winners are going to be providing that.
Yes. And the other thing is, and you mentioned this earlier too, is that in some ways, in the past, we owned the application, right? The application was a application you installed on your workstation, and then it became a server app, or it was a client server application. But we owned both parts of it, or one part of it, or whatever. Nowadays, because of the rise of SaaS, because of the rise of as a service, we don't own everything anymore, right? So some of this stuff is owned by us and some of it's not, but yet we have to secure it. We have to manage it. We have to give, a consistent feel for it. And we have to deal with identity across all of it too, because the end users just need to be able to log in. So it's become more complex, even though in some ways we're no longer managing those apps, right?
That's exactly right. You just nailed it. I want to kind of put that on a plaque and put it on my wall. That's perfect. Because our job now is to aggregate, secure, and to manage identity. That's the job, right? And now it has to be on every kind of use case, whether it's a legacy PC, an on-prem app, client server, SaaS, cloud, whatever. IT is responsible for all of that. Now it's about aggregation and securing. And the reason I love that so much is you brought us full circle to why the thin client is back and it's relevant, because you need a device that you can software control that'll do that for you, that'll shut somebody off who shouldn't be in, right? That will let you repurpose a piece of hardware to do what you want and not allow something else. Repurposing, I mentioned is one of the points I made earlier. That's one of the biggest drivers for success we've had. Think of was it 1.2 billion PCs are out there, the last statistic? Every single one of those could be a secure endpoint with software.
Yeah.
And you don't have to replace it.
Well, here's a good question for you. Here's an honest question. You know, you and I are both consultants by training. As I like to say, I'm a consultant by training. So the answer is always, you know, it all depends. Where do you see, I mean, do you see a thin client, or for lack of a better term, a thin client as the perfect client for this type of computing? Or do you see it a hybrid where, you know, some people are for this and some people aren't? Where do you draw the line there?
Well, it depends. I'm totally kidding.
Yeah.
I think and this is where I'm a huge
depend.
fan of IGEL, you know, and I know that you're working with them now, but it's not a commercial. It's a sincere endorsement. I think it's both. I think it's software that lets you repurpose any device that you already have or have access to, and then the ability to purchase thin clients when you're refreshing or buying. That to me is the perfect situation. And then the third use case, which doesn't really need any kind of product per se, is when you allow a knowledge worker to, you know, like have their own laptop, right? And so in that case, they're just using their laptop and then they're accessing other things remotely. And then there you have to apply security at the app level.
Yeah, what's interesting about the IGEL solution is we have that IGEL OS, and then really the differences between the different platforms we have or products we have, be it Universal Device Converter, the UDC, or the UD Pocket, or, you know, a thin traditional based hardware thin client, is really how the operating system is deployed, right? If it's a hardware, well, it's deployed on the hardware. If it's the UDC, well, we're taking an existing machine and we're converting it to the IGEL OS. Or if it's a UD Pocket, it might fit well where you just talked about is, you know, this, for example, me, I have a Mac. I wanted to keep my Mac. I did not go with the IGEL, operating system that or the Windows base that they give out to the SEs and the salespeople and things like that. What I have is my own Mac. I have a UD Pocket USB thin client. I plug that thing in, I boot to it. I can get all access to all the stuff that I have within the IGEL world, you know, within my world, be that SaaS applications, you know, Citrix applications, even some other stuff, because I have hooks into VMware's test drive and parallels and what have you, just so I can play around with it, right? And I can put all that into one and have that centrally managed. But then I can reboot my machine and be back into my personal world with all my viruses and everything else. I don't have viruses, hopefully. But
to me, that's the perfect solution. We tried other things with type 1, type 2 hypervisors and tried to make that distinction. But, you know, if your company policy is you can only work in this context, what better than sticking in a USB drive and rebooting, and the device is that context. And then when that context is over, it goes away. That's freaking perfect. You know, but if you have 2,000 users who come to a facility and security matters, well, then you just, you know, you buy IGEL thin client, the actual hardware. And this is a funny story going back to the NCD days. We sold thousands and thousands of thin clients over the years into manufacturing, all kinds of situations. And this one story was a pallet of them was sent to a company and they were stolen. They were broken down and stolen.
Interesting.
But they were thin clients. And the robbers didn't understand what they were. And then they magically appeared 2 days later back on the dock.
Is that true? That's
a true story.
That's crazy.
Absolutely true story. It seemed like somebody who worked there was trying to steal computers. And then they tried to use them and they didn't do anything. And they brought them back.
They should have downloaded the IGEL OS and they could have had a fully functional operating system.
Exactly.
Not fully functional. I mean, well, it is fully functional for what we want to do with it, which is a better way to compute. You mentioned VDI. I'm going to sort of jump around. You mentioned VDI becoming a sort of a full citizen. I was not a big fan of VDI at first. And the reason I wasn't a big fan of VDI at first is that I believe that you ended up with two desktops because you had some local, some remote, some this, some that, you know, and maybe, you know, many different reasons, right? What do you know, what's your opinion on VDI and has that changed over the years? Where do you see that being deployed? What's the right use case? You know, what's your view on VDI?
You know, this is why I'm going to keep kidding you about this, but this is why it depends really is always the answer.
Oh, it is always the answer.
Because
truly.
It depends on when you're talking. So when VDI first came out, we did some rescue projects with VDI, very, very large financial organization. Everyone would know their name, bought another credit card processing company and couldn't do the integration, right? So this is like 2008. And we did VDI to do it. Well, then it was very different because we were trying to shoehorn it into existing servers with spinning drives and limited memory footprints. So VDI was like too resource intensive, right? And then when you worked all those issues out, every single VDI was competing for IOPS. Then you had kind of throughput and experience issues. But flash forward like way into the future, it's not a problem. We have amazingly fast storage, flash-based, software-defined platforms that blow your mind, like Datrium. We're doing a lot of solutions with them today. So it's a full citizen because we've overcome the bottlenecks. It used to be too resource intensive for the kinds of servers and platforms we had. Those problems are gone. So now to me, it's mostly a preference or an application compatibility question. Is this organization more comfortable with desktop OS, or server? And that becomes more of the guiding principle at this point. What's best for the organization? One more comment on that. And more we're seeing a maturing where in organizations like I'm describing, they do have the desktop people working in VDI and creating those images and installing the apps because they're familiar with them. Back in the day, and you know this well, Doug, as an old Citrix guy, the damn poor Citrix guy also became responsible for the apps because they had to be installed on a server. Sure. And so you have these huge organizations and one, maybe two guys handling all of the applications for the organization. When you go to a desktop OS, you can give that to the people that are naturally in charge of it.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right there. And like you said, you just don't have the problems you had. It was technology issues, and sort of like Citrix in the early days, right? You didn't have enough RAM, so you couldn't put enough users. It wasn't the technology wasn't there; it's the hardware wasn't there. It just took some time to mature.
Exactly.
Now, VDI is an interesting one for me because, and from the IGEL perspective, or from the the endpoint perspective, right? Because you want to pair the right desktop experience to the right backend experience, or you want to pair that so you can give the best experience based on what's being delivered to you. With VDI, I see that as a perfect use case for a secure endpoint like an IGEL solution. Why? Because you just give them a desktop, they log in, they have their desktop, it's one device, we can give them a great experience, blah, 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 right? If it's not VDI, then you might already have a Windows app, and maybe you're doing it seamless. But where do you see the thin client fitting in if it's in those scenarios? You know what I mean? If I was a customer and said, "Hey, I want to do a little Zen app of VDI, what have you," how do you recommend that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. This is a sign of maturity. It really becomes more of an organizational question. I ask more questions about skills and preferences and how people are organized. They become more the driving issue today than technology, to your point. We used to be technology. Oh, well, we can get this many on this box, so we're going to have to do this, right? Now it's more like understanding the organization. It's funny because sometimes companies push back because they're so used to being siloed. Like IT doesn't really want to talk to the users, and we're often the bridge that say, "Hey guys, let's just stop right now. Let's set up appointments and go meet with the key end users in the business." And it's like this revelation, to see what people need and how they think and what they do. So I'm giving you a really like softy answer, but that's because the technology is not the limitation. The best solution now is understanding the people, the mission of the business, how they're organized, the geography, where the skill sets are, and then making the solution fit that instead of trying to force the business to adopt the technology.
You're so right in a couple different levels there. One, I think of it as the right use or the right experience for the right use case, right? Meaning you're going to give the end user the best experience. And so in return, it's not about it's about the user, right? What gives the user what makes them more productive, right?
Exactly.
And I guess I'll leave it at that. At the end of the day, that's what it's about. Well, the other piece, I guess.
Last year, I'll tell you a funny story about that.
Please.
Last year, Ruben, Sprout, Aaron, Teresa, the CTPs asked me to join them in a joint presentation at Synergy. And it was kind of like take 4 experts and give them each 10 minutes of like the big lesson learned, right? So here I am, 20 years technology, got all these big enterprise projects, healthcare, finance, everything else. And what I felt was the most essential lesson to pass on was to go know the end user, which really makes your point.
Yeah.
And I felt like it was a little bit of a risk because I'm supposed to be the tech guy, but I did an explanation of how to do it. I came up with a methodology and I just like open sourced it. Like, what are the questions you ask?
Yeah.
And to my delight, it turned out to be one of the top rated sessions of the whole of Synergy.
Well, of course, that goes without saying. But you're so right. Even methodology in a box, 18 years ago, something like that, talked about the end user. And I was always taught, you don't just go out and try to find, talk to the end user. Go find the nastiest end user, the meanest one, the one that always complains, and figure out what their complaint is.
Exactly.
Because if you can make that person happy, now everyone else knows that, John or Jane is now happy. Oh my. That person just shut up. Oh my, this must be great, right? You bring everyone else along with them. And sometimes that's possible. Sometimes they're just negative people and you can't do anything with them. But that's how I always looked at it. And I think it's the most important thing, especially when you talk about migration, and everyone says, well, I can't train my users. I got 10,000 of them. Yeah, you still can. You just can't do it one-on-one, in one day, right? But you still need to talk to these people. You still need to get out there because IT is there for them. They're not there for, us. I always make the joke, no user ever walks into in a company in the morning and says, gee, I can't wait to use that new Cisco core router they just implemented, right? They all come in and say, damn it, I got to make a PowerPoint today, or I got to make a presentation. They don't even use the technology name, right?
And in that regard, you never get a call thanking you for fast login time.
Right? Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Because they, and I also say that users have benchmarks. We have benchmarks, right? How many IOPS you give, how many frames per second, what have you, right? But they have benchmarks, and their benchmark is that they expect their machine, their experience to be better than what they have at home because we're professionals, right? And what we give them a lot of times is we don't give them that experience. We don't give them the applications they want. We give them roadblocks and headaches. And I think that's a thing of the past. And the companies that succeed in the future will be the ones that do, or partly give them that. The other companies are the ones who understand their data, understand what their users and their customers are doing, and that's the whole.
And that was kind
AI.
of the point you were saying about the impact of the consumerization of technologies. People expecting a great experience, right? The other thing, Doug, is happens all the time. Is if I just get the client and the IT people to be willing to go meet end users and spend time with them, they find the simplest, smallest things that people have problems with that either can easily be fixed and make them happy, or completely change the entire architecture and design. Oh, you're trying to do that. Well, we're not building it the right way, right?
Yeah.
And just checking can make the system so much more successful. I'll tell you a funny story because you love this, because this is almost like a Doug Brown story. In 2004, we undertook a large project with the Mayo Clinic to virtualize the hospital, the endpoints and the exam rooms. And, it was still relatively early in the technology. It was a bit of a risk and a leap of faith. But after it was all done, we did the final closeout meetings, documentation. It was a big success. I went with the project manager who was an ex-trauma nurse. So he knew the clinicians, he was well accepted. And we said, let's just walk the floor. The project's over, it's done, it's success. Let's go take a look. And we went up to first pod, and they were busy. They didn't want to talk to us. We went to the next pod and kind of stood there and how things going. And the lady turned to us and said she was on a thin client, didn't know the difference. There was a PC next to her and a new thin client working on it saying, guys, the system's fine. I'm really busy right now. Can you just come back later? And I said, that's all I need to know.
That's cool.
They don't see the technology. They have nothing to say about it. Our job's done.
So would you say that you can give with an IGEL with a modern thin client, you can give the type of experience that the users demand today? That's basically what you just said, right?
Absolutely. Today you can do even better because you can add GPUs on the server side.
Yep.
And the local devices are so much more powerful. Some of these new thin clients are freaking supercomputers, and they cost a few $100.
Yeah.
So absolutely. Not only can you can actually sometimes do better, because if you're working on a generic laptop or PC, you're not going to have a high performance graphics card. And if you stick like an NVIDIA, Radeon profile on the server side, you can give somebody the equivalent of a high-end workstation.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And something like back to the UD Pocket too, you can flop flip that thing into a MacBook and utilize the power of the MacBook. So you just made the thin client as powerful as your 2017 MacBook, right? Which is pretty darn powerful.
It is. Yeah, so we're in a great time. I feel like there's a rebirth and reemergence of this style computing. I'm avoiding the word because you and I both want a new way to say this, and we haven't figured it out yet. So we should have a DABCC contest to rename the endpoint.
That's a really great idea. I will. I think I'll do that. I think I'll take you up on that one. That's a great idea because I don't like it. I've always been a fan of thin clients because it dates back to my, to me being a mainframer. It just made sense that you have this device. And what doesn't make sense to me is that, we for years now we virtualized the back end. We've centralized the back end for all the benefits that that every one of us know, but we completely ignored the endpoint. So a lot of these ROI savings and total cost of ownership savings is complete crap compared to what if we could take the endpoint and get the same exact benefits, right? Anywhere time computing, secure access, set it up the way the user wants it to be set up and have that roam with them where they go. For example, that UD Pocket just slapping it into different devices. I get the same experience, the same OS, the same settings. It just comes with me. It's what Citrix brought to the application is what IGEL brings to the endpoint, right? Now you have a complete 360 approach to computing, not just a 180 and leave this. This is my problem with VDI, is that it was all great and fine and dandy, and I love the idea and all the benefits from the back end made sense. But the front end, we still had the PC. Nobody wanted to get rid of that, or some people did, but not en masse.
Right, exactly. No, I completely agree. We're positioned better than ever to do what the promise always was. I mean, it worked and it did great things, but now it can do everything and it can do even more. I'm just super excited to be doing it for 20 years and have this be the best time to be doing it.
Yeah, I've always said it's the best time, and it does get better. And but I will agree, it got a little bit slow there, and I won't. When you get into hyperconvergence and all this other great stuff that was going on, the revolution in storage, right? I mean, just what happened in the past 15 years in storage. When you and I started, storage was just how fast we could spin a wheel or drive, right? A platter.
Right.
And nowadays it's like, oh gosh, I mean, you remember the old Tiki drives when they first came out, the first solids, well, it's a solid state that had a hard drive and a battery. Remember those little things?
Oh, yeah. We've been just, the other thing I want to make before we close down, because I know we're coming to the end of time, is a really interesting phenomenon that the life cycle of technology has compressed to things that used to take 10 years, like the lifespan of Novell, right?
Yeah.
Was maybe 10 years. And then a next technology would be 5. It's getting so fast, Doug, that literally when we go from one project to the next we're re-architecting. We're not even using the same solution, 3 months later. It's that fast.
So, Steve, I have one last question for you,
Sure.
and actually, we could go on forever, but I have one really big question for you, and that is, what is the next life cycle? Where are we going? What's utopia for us? Do you have what would utopia be for you today from what you know? And you can bring in technologies like IoT or AI if you want to also. Draw us a big pie in the sky Steve Greenberg dream.
Well, I'm going to make this up. They're just going to wing it because I'm with you and you're the master of winging it. But I think that the computer becomes like in the original Star Trek when Kirk would say, computer, and do something. And I think that's how it should be. I think you should type, use your mouse, talk, press, touch. I think it should become more like the environment around you, like you can touch things and do stuff. So that's kind of like the pie in the sky. And then in terms of like corporate computing, I think the cloud should be like you drag and drop an app to the cloud, and then it just runs where you need it.
You got it. I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. And what else do I say? Now, I lied. One more question. If there's one technology today, and it could be anything, it doesn't even have to be in our space, that you like, that you find yourself reading most about, that really intrigues you, that right now is on the forefront of your brain. What is that?
It's absolutely the blockchain. Not so much cryptocurrency part, but
Sure.
the idea that a public ledger
Yep.
can unchangeable and
Yep.
secure and validated, and that transactions occur because computers around the world cooperate on it and
Yep.
test and check each other.
Yep.
So I think that's kind of like when you threw out what's your dream, I think that compute is just ubiquitous. I picture that you go and buy a house and it's got a hot water heater, a washer dryer, a range, microwave, and X terahash of compute, right? And it's just in there. And I think it could also do things like heat the hot water, you know. And I think the blockchain can get us to that type of scenario because no one owns it.
Yeah.
And that's the amazing thing about it is no one owns it, but it's secure and immutable, and we all agree on it.
And transparent.
The ultimate democratic technology.
Yeah, and transparent too. The blockchain is extremely interesting. I've read a couple books on it, but just trying to figure it out, right? Because it's this thing that's sort of outside of what we all sort of live in. And it came out of Bitcoin, and what have you. And I'm not a big fan of Bitcoin because I didn't buy it when I should have. And now I'm sort of don't pay attention to it because I could be a billionaire if I would have bought it when I wanted to. But where do you see blockchain fitting into IT? Because what I hear is that blockchain is going to be bigger than the internet, which is a really bold statement. But if you think about it, it has the ability to affect every piece of our life, from banking to government to how we buy houses, to see the history of it that's or that's secure and you can't change it, all that blah blah blah. Where do you see it fitting into IT?
I think we don't know yet, just like we didn't know what the internet was going to be. So you and I, became professionals in the industry around the time the internet was coming up from the
Correct.
very beginning. And we didn't really know what it was going to be, but you remember how you just knew it was going to matter, but
Yeah.
you didn't really know how. And we hadn't seen Facebook yet, or eBay, or Amazon was maybe starting, and it was like, oh, you can buy books. That's interesting.
Yeah, but why would you do it? Why would you do that? I got Barnes & Noble right here, and it smells great.
Exactly.
I love
and
the
I can
smell
get
of
a
book.
coffee in the cafe. So,
Yeah.
I don't think we know yet, but those attributes that I talked about a public ledger that everyone participates in, where the data it can't be changed or obscured. Everything right now is a silo. So the only thing I do know is that it will get rid of silos and it'll give you more security, ironically, by becoming public. But there's probably going to be a big struggle between centralized powers and blockchain. I don't know how it's going to play out, but that's going to be
Well, that's going to be a huge one because, does governments talk about transparency, but they're inherently not transparent by nature, right? And some of it's good, some of it's bad, or some of it's for good, some of it's for bad, right? We don't want our secrets airing on the blockchain, for all to see. But I think that those guys, anytime you try to take control away from someone is definitely, I don't care who you are, is a bad thing. So, they go kicking and screaming. But I think you're right. We don't know where it's going yet. With the blockchain, you could have databases that are all over the place and you have redundant copies of everything, but yet it's not. You still get fast access. That would be very interesting for IT, where, our data doesn't disappear. We don't have to manage our own SQL servers anymore. All of our data sits up in the blockchain, right?
I think that's more the direction, but who knows?
Yeah.
So let's have another conversation about that.
Yeah. Guys listening, if you're not into the blockchain, if you're not paid attention to this, Stephen is exactly correct. It is something you should start getting some books on. There's some great books up on Audible, and there's some many different great books on Amazon to talk about that. But I highly recommend it. It's something I've started reading, and I wouldn't admit that I understand it, but I think I do. Yeah, which is a bad place to be, right? I think I do, which means I don't. Steve, we can go on and on. I wanted to talk to you about AI and IoT, but we'll do that another day. I've taken too much of your time. So, I'll give you the last word. If there's anything else, you would like to share with us. Maybe, do you have a favorite book? Are you a reader by chance?
I am a reader, but I have a favorite thing that's not a book now I want to talk about and get out there.
Please.
In response to 20 plus years of going to conferences, I finally decided with our local Citrix user group that we want to create the conference we all want to be at. And so we created this thing called the Masters Retreat. where you invite experts and users to come together and share information. It was completely like we had no business doing this. We had no idea what we were doing. We did it last year, April, in Prescott, Arizona, and it was hugely phenomenal. We're doing it again in April in Prescott, Arizona, 20th to 22nd. And this is just a call out. It's a small conference, but it's self-organizing. Some of the smartest people are there. End users are there. You can come and present something. You can come and learn. It's hard to explain. It's an interactive thing, but I'm really excited about it. That's what's on my mind. I want to open up an invitation. There's probably like 20 spots left as we record this in February. And I hope that some of you will hear this and come join us. Just go to our website, thinclient.net. It's on the main page. All the information's there. And Doug was a master, and Doug was coming, but because of a conflict in business priorities, he can't be there. But other people like Doug will be there.
I have to be in London, so I'm going to be across the globe, which I tried to get there because I really wanted to. I chatted. This is going to be so cool because I chatted with Gary, who runs the CUGC in New York, and he's coming, and he's like, we just don't talk about stuff. We just don't do PowerPoints. He's like, I'm coming with a Nutanix cluster and all this great stuff, and I was just like, oh my God, you lost me. Like, oh, I so want to be there. So that's
a perfect example. Gary came last year, just like he on his own. He just came from New Jersey to the middle of Arizona, was an awesome participator. And this year he's like, I really want to give something. I'm bringing Nutanix, and I have 3 topics I can talk about. And it's not a PowerPoint. And we just come, we meet, we do an open space conference, which you meet in a circle, suggest topics, kind of organize them into sessions, schedule them, and go. It's amazing.
Guys, if you're anywhere closer, well, Gary, he's all the way across the country, so I can't express. I've been to a couple of Steve's events, and I've known Steve for a while. Believe it or not, I think as long as I've known anybody in the Citrix space was Steve.
Yep, for sure.
The only other person would be Jimmy Kinzig, right?
Oh yeah.
So, do you remember giving Jim the award many years ago?
That was the greatest thing. You're such a nice guy.
It was your idea. I think it was.
As usual, but 10 years or so after the thin list was created by Jim Kensick, Doug really felt like this guy deserves recognition. This is before there was even a community in all these programs. And we put together a special award for him and presented it like iForum or something. And that was awesome.
Yeah. Well, Jim started it all. There's this, there's a lot of newbies in this space today, and God bless them. Welcome to our community. This is wonderful, and they're contributing like crazy, and it's just a great place to be. This whole community is huge. It's wonderful, filled with great guys. But there was a few that really started it. The guys that just loved what we were doing. The people like you, the people like Jim Kinzig. If it wasn't for Jim Kinzig, there would be no. I mean, I don't know if I would have continued doing Citrix because I wouldn't have known how to do it, right?
No, well, Jim as the list, Roy Takeshi.com, your site. Yep. These were the pioneers. In fact, Roy is one of the masters at the retreat. He's based in Arizona, so he's one of the key guys.
Well, that guy right alone is the reason I would go. So, in fact, maybe I should just quit my job and go. No, I won't do that.
Quit for a day.
What's that?
Quit for a weekend.
Quit for a weekend. Yes, exactly. Take vacation.
Go back on Monday. I'm like, I'm sorry, I was in a bad mood. Can I come back?
Pull a Larry David. Just scream at them and then come on Monday as if nothing ever happened.
All right, we're gonna close on that.
On that note, let's go. Let's call this an episode. Steve, thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you again. I'll see you probably at Synergy. So I'm on my way back to Europe. So
anytime you want to talk, I'll do this all day long. This is a blast.
Yeah, we got to do more. What we need to do is more roundtables. Those are a lot of fun. So, and I want to bring you on someday just to hear what you say about IoT and AI and maybe a deeper conversation on blockchain. I love the server-based computing space, the VDI space, but I've always tried to keep one foot in the door, 1 foot out. And that 1 foot out the door is what introduced me to Citrix, right? As I was looking for something new. And so I always play and like to read a lot about, IoT and AI and blockchain and, all these emerging technologies so that when they do come in, I have somewhat of an understanding about them, right?
Yeah, that's really important. In fact, why don't we do this, Doug? We keep saying we're ending, but this will be the end. Let's spend some time in that and do a really good job and offer your listeners a really meaningful episode on all that.
I would love to do it.
How to use it. Let's do that.
We'll definitely do it. We'll just start with IoT and work our way into the fun stuff. So I mean, there's nobody that jumped on OctaBlue bigger than Steve Greenberg. And
we can talk about that whole life cycle as well. Doug, it's awesome to speak with you always. And I'm looking forward to the next time.
Hey, thank you so much, Steve. Let's call this an episode. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay, so that concludes another successful episode of DABCC Radio. Steve, thank you so much. Thanks so much for doing this. I've been trying to get Steve on the line forever, and the guy's the busiest person I know. So, and I know a lot of busy folks, and he's just I'm so grateful that he took the time was able to take the time to come on the show and chat with us. So he's just a brilliant guy. If you don't know Steve, definitely reach out to him at one of the shows or on Twitter or what have you. Steve's one of the most approachable, nicest guys in the industry. And I'm very happy that I've known him for as long as I have. What do I say? So he brought up something interesting. I want to tell you guys a funny story that's true about end users and about going out and training end users and really the art of doing the job beyond just being a good engineer. And I've told this quote a few times, so I'll start off with it because it's what taught me this stuff. And then this gentleman that gave me this quote also taught me how to go out and train users, how to walk around and talk to users, and how to break down what I call us versus them. So the quote goes something like this: Doug, you're a good engineer. You can build a great network, but if the end users don't perceive it's a great network, you will never be a great engineer. And listen to that one a couple times. It's so deep and so powerful. It's incredible, and it changed my life. That one sentence, or that one quote right there from a guy named Doug Shreve changed my entire life, and it's the reason I do and have what I have today and do what I do today and know people like Steve today. It's because of that simple thing. And he taught me, Doug, it's not, you can build this great network, but, you need to be able to go out and talk to the engineers. And I said, you need to talk to the users. I said, I don't like the users. Yes, that's typical, Doug, but you need to. You're there for those guys. So he said, go in the morning, go find the people that use the machines and tell them stories. Joke with them a little bit. Make them feel like they're part of it. Tell them what you're doing. Tell them about what you're deploying that day or some of the problems you've had. Ask them questions. Ask them what they think. Ask them what they want. Make them part of the solution, because inherently in life, human beings have something called us versus them, engineering versus sales. Tech versus everyone else, right? We have it just left and right in society, and you can go down the line of us versus them. But if you can tear down that wall of us versus them, it becomes us. And when you're in a family, you tend not to criticize the family. You tend to try to find solutions to solve the family's problems, right? So the story goes, so that's the reason. And now let me tell you a fun story. So this is totally true. So many years ago, I was a consultant, and I came home about 10 o'clock at night, 10 p.m., and I sat down on my couch, and I hadn't even take off my clothes. I think my backpack was sitting next to me, and I was just sitting there tired, and probably sat there for 10, 15 minutes without the TV on, just sort of staring into space, thinking about whatever the heck I had just done. And so I turned on the TV, and I'm flipping through. Nothing was on TV, and I came upon Billy Joel, the singer. And I'm at that age where my parents love Billy Joel, and I grew up with Billy Joel. And so I was like, you know what, I'll listen to see what, it's an interview. It's always fun to hear what these guys have to say. And the first question they asked him was, Billy, do you like your job? He said, I love my job. I go to different places. I meet different people. They pay me really well, and they cheer for me when I'm done. And I'm sitting there, and I'm thinking to myself in my, cloudy, extremely tired brain. And I said to myself, you know what? I go to different places. I meet different people. They pay me pretty well. Now, they don't pay me Billy money, but I get paid enough. But they don't cheer for me when I'm done. This is before I started doing sessions. I was an engineer, right? And they don't cheer for me when I'm done. So I thought about it, and I said, I got it. So I'm not a guy that likes to wake up early in the morning and get to the office first thing. I did when I first started, I'll tell you that much. I was the first one there and the last one to leave. But I got a little bit lazy, and I like to work late at night. So I'd come in and, 30 minutes after, because you went on site at 9, didn't no reason to be at the office at 8. But this day I woke up and I was there at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I was one of the first people in the parking lot, and I'm waiting by a lady named Josie, and Josie was the girl that was responsible for all the SEs, work orders and tell us where to go and if there's any parts to deliver or any problems to fix or, what have you, right? She was in charge of, helping us figure out what we needed to do. And Josie thought I was a bit strange, and I like to tell Josie funny things and great stories and what I was doing in my life and what have you. So I always like to mess with her in a bit. And so I was standing by Josie's desk, and she came in, she looked at me, she goes, "Why are you here?" I said, "Oh, Josie, I got a story for you. I got to tell you this." She goes, "Do I want to hear this?" I was like, "Probably not." She goes, "Well, then why are you going to tell me?" I was like, "Because it's really good, Josie. It's really good." She goes, "Okay." And she with this look on her face like, "Oh my God, what's going to hit me right now?" And I said, last night I was watching this, I would come home and I'm flipping through and I see Billy Joel, and they meet, I go different places and meet different people. They pay me pretty well and they cheer for me when I'm done. And I was like, Josie, I'm that way, but they don't cheer for me when I'm done. And she's looking at me with this face going, "Oh my God, where is this going?" I said, "So Josie, I got it." And at this place, at this time, her face went completely blank and she's like, "No, do I want to hear this?" And I was like, "No, you don't, but I will tell you nonetheless." So I said, "What I'm going to do is I'm going to get all my friends together and we're going to record ourselves cheering for me. And it's going to be, 'Go, Doug, go. Reboot. Yeah, Doug.' And then I'm going to go on site and I'm going to be like, "Oh, yeah, I can totally fix that problem. That's just, I can totally fix that. No problem. Give me a few minutes. I'll have this thing fixed," or, a couple hours. And at that time, out of my bag, because in those days you carried big bags with you with all your CDs and floppy disks and what have you. And out of the bag, I bring a little tape recorder, press play. And as I'm working, it goes, "Yeah, go, Doug, go. Reboot. Yeah." I looked at Josie, and Josie has a look on her face, a pure scared. And she said, "You will not do that, Doug. You have to promise me you will not do that. They will kick you out. They will think you are crazy. That we are professionals. You will not do that." I was like, "Don't worry, Josie. I won't do that. So we did a project. And many years later, or a couple years later, I was doing a project up in Northwest Iowa. And this project was actually where I met Doug Shreve, where he told me about this quote about me being the quest to being a good engineer. So we're sitting there, every day I walked into the this location I was at. I walked around and talked to the users. I made friends. I would tell them stories and what have you. And at the very end, we took out the key people for dinner. It was like a 6-month project, and we said, "Thank you very much. We're going to take you guys out for dinner." So the people that really helped us was a combination of the admin staff and some of the users, believe it or not, because they were very integral in helping us deploy this and helping us change the mindset within the customer or within the user base, right? So I took them out for dinner, and when it was all said and done, we said our thank yous and say, "Doug, no, we're not done. We have something for you. We have a present for you." I was like, "Oh, a gift? Oh, great. Well, what did you get me?" And out of their bag, they put a tape recorder on the desk, and they pressed play. And it said, "Go, Doug, go. Reboot. Yay!" Well, I guess I must have told them the story once or twice as I was making friends with these guys and making them laugh and showing them a good time and teaching them about what we're doing and what I do for a living, right? And they liked it. So they put that together for me. And usually I would have stayed up in that town because it was about 3-4 hours away from where I lived. And I would have stayed up in that town that night and drove back to the shop in the morning. But no. I went straight back to the shop. I drove the 3-4 hours back home. I was got home in the middle of the night, woke up at 7 o'clock in the morning or 6:30 in the morning. I was at the office at 7 o'clock in the morning and standing at Josie's desk. Josie walks in. She goes, "What are you doing here? Aren't you supposed to be in Storm Lake?" And I was like, No. It's like, "I got something for you." She gave me that look on her face like, "Oh my God, do I want to see this?" I was like, "Yes, you do want to see this." And out of my bag, I brought a tape recorder and I pressed play. And she just lost it. She said, "Doug, I told you, you promised me you would not do this. You promised me you would not do this. You promised me. Why? Doug, you promised me." And I said, "Josie, I did not do this. Our customer did this." And her face went just still. And she said, "Are you serious?" I said, "Yeah." And I told her, and she said, "Only you, Doug, only you." I was like, "They're my friends now." She said, I guess that's why they love us." So guys, that's the trick. That's the secret sauce. That's what separates from the men from the boys, the women from the girls, right? The pros from the amateurs. It's the fact that, yes, you can build a great network, but if the end users don't perceive it's a great network, and if you don't make friends with them, you don't bring them onto the project with you, along with you, if you don't break down us versus them, you're you're not doing your job. You're only doing 1% of it, or, a percentage of it. And the other part is, I think, most important. So that's a very true story about end users. I still have that tape today. I should find it and digitize it. I know where it is. I should digitize it and put it on the back of the podcast. But maybe I'll do that someday. So it's a long story. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Like I said, totally true. And just an example of how I try to do business, and that is make friends, tear down those us versus them. So on that note, Steve, thank you very much again. Thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed the story. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. And I hope you enjoyed DABCC Radio. So with no further ado, please check out www.dabcc.com for the latest and greatest. Check out thinclient.net for what Steve's doing. Check out IGEL.com for all the amazing stuff going on in IGEL. And have a great day, guys. Thank you so much. If you enjoyed it, please tell a friend. And thank you for listening to DABCC Radio.
CC?
DABCC.
Say it again. DABCC.
DABCC.
Can you say it again? DABCC.
DABCC.
How about DABCC?
DABCC.
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 DABCC.